Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of Michael Barnett, and this is in regards to the Natalia Grace case. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on what that is here after we go ahead and roll the intro first. All right. The Natalia Grace case, also known as the Curious Case of Natalia Grace, is a complicated and mysterious narrative revolving around a Ukrainian orphan named Natalia and her American adoptive family, the Barnetts. Due to the unusual and controversial nature of the case and the events that transpired within it, the case has attracted a worldwide amount of attention. Natalia's actual age and whether she is a troubled orphan with a rare condition or a grown woman posing as a child are central to the investigation. The narrative about Natalia Grace has been shaped by the legal proceedings, media coverage, and personal accounts of the involved parties. This summary is meant to provide a decent overview of the case as of July 2023. In 2010, the Barnetts of Central Indiana decided to adopt Natalia, who was believed to be a 6-year-old Ukrainian girl with an uncommon bone disorder that caused dwarfism. Over time, however, doubts about Natalia's age emerged. The Barnetts observed physical and behavioral characteristics that suggested that she may be older than stated, such as signs of early adolescence and a more developed physique and vocabulary that exceeded her stated age range. The contentious dispute over Natalia's age reached its peak during a vacation to Disney World, where Natalia's adopted mother, Christine Barnett, observed signs of physical development inconsistent with her alleged age. Despite the medical opinions to the contrary, the Barnetts ultimately petitioned an Indiana court in 2012 to legally alter Natalia's age from 8 all the way to 22 years old. Following the court's decisions, the Barnetts relocated to Canada with their 3 sons, abandoning Natalia in her apartments in Lafayette, Indiana. The Barnetts encountered legal consequences in 2019 when they were charged with multiple counts of neglect in connection with Natalia's abandonment. Adopted father Michael Barnett was charged with neglect of a dependent, neglect resulting in bodily injury, neglect resulting in severe bodily injury, and conspiracy to neglect a dependent. Throughout the trial, Natalia's actual age became a contentious issue, and the case garnered worldwide media attention with differing portrayals of the Barnetts as deceived victims or even negligent parents. Michael's accusations were ultimately dropped in February of 2022, and Christine's charges were dropped in March of 2023. The central mystery of the case centers around Natalia's alleged identity and behavior. Natalia, according to the Barnetts, attempted to harm them and threatened to murder them. They believed that they were living with a con artist and a sociopath, and questioned her true origins and intentions. However, there are no indications that Natalia has actually murdered a single person. The age of Natalia remained a pivotal issue during the prosecution's case against Michael, despite the exclusion of pertinent evidence. The restrictions on discussing Natalia's adoption age, mental health records, and alleged statements about wishing to harm the Barnetts posed difficulties for the defense and prompted jury concern. As of 2023, the Natalia Grace case remains unresolved, with conflicting accounts and scant evidence obscuring Natalia's true identity and actions. The case has inspired worldwide intrigue and discussion regarding the identity, deception, and complexities of the adoption. Despite media coverage, a documentary series, and legal proceedings, definitive answers remain elusive regarding Natalia's alleged age and behavior. In today's video, I'm going to be analyzing footage from that documentary series of Michael Barnett, as many of you have requested. There's a lot of this footage, so this is only a small portion of it, but we should be able to garner some information from it. I think that's enough of the backstory. Let's go ahead and continue into the video.
I hope I don't overstate this and make it seem a little bit too Norman Rockwell American life, but life was fantastic. It really was. This is summer.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here and make just a couple notes about what I have seen of Michael's nonverbal communication throughout the entirety of this interview, throughout the entirety of the docuseries itself. he seems to have this air of performatism about him while he's speaking. It seems as though he's putting on some sort of show, which adds a level of disconnect and disingenuous feeling to his words and what he's saying. So that's something that you will pick up on as we continue on through this. And I have a lot of feelings about this case. We'll just have to continue working on through it. It's very fascinating. Let's continue.
Summer 2010.
Life's great. Been married for about 15 years. We have 3 sons, Jacob, Wesley, and Ethan. Financially, we're doing great. We've got a literal brand new McMansion, 5,000 square foot home in a prestigious town. Got a driveway loaded with cars in it. There's a Lamborghini in my driveway, for God's sakes. We have 13 TVs. We've got 14 couches. There was hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank account. More importantly,
We were in a very tight-knit family. It really was the pinnacle of life.
Christine and I,
Okay, gonna go ahead and pause there. Fascinating the things that was focused on upon by Michael during that entire recollection. There was a very, very short period of focusing on the actual family and a lot of focus on possessions, a lot of focus on wealth, anything that might add a little bit more weight to his reputable opinion of himself. So it's fascinating to be able to see what Michael feels is valuable in his eyes, and it seems to be possessions, money, and status rather than actual family values. Let's see how and why that might actually play out. There is a lot of complexity to this case.
Christine and I, we could do anything together. And when we realized our oldest son, Jacob, has Asperger's or autism, we fought those fights. We were downright amazing at the things we could accomplish. So we went.
A lot of no-shaking during that time. We were downright amazing at the things that we could accomplish. And even earlier, when we're seeing these clips of Michael speaking, I'm noticing a fair bit of no-shaking while he's saying things that would be affirmative. So you would expect to see a nod with that here in the American culture. So that's fascinating for me to be able to note. Now, that being said, they're not micro shakes. So it's possible that he is intentionally doing these no shakes in here, which if that's the case, would be related to the you wouldn't believe or it's unbelievable as he's stating these things. However, I do want to make note of that because it is a possibility of a desynchronization point. And as the narrative continues, we do find out that there is a lot more behind what he's saying here than he's even giving hint to here. And that's according to another interview that he did later on. If you would like me to eventually get to that one as well, let me know in the comments of this video. But as for what we're working with right here, we're just seeing that possible desynchronization, making a note of it as we continue forward.
So we went from early 2010. We're blessed with many things. By the time 2014 came around, I have 37 cents in my bank account. I have no wife. I have no children. I have no home. I have no job. My possessions at that moment was my car and a backpack of clothing. If Natalia never entered our lives, I never get divorced. We had no idea what we were dealing with.
Gonna go ahead and pause here. So this is a fascinating thing that he's talking about. Again, we're talking again about the possessions and everything that goes behind that and what he's lost. And in this part, he does mention at least he doesn't have a wife, has no sons. He does start again with the financial side of things and then focuses largely again on his possessions and his status and his job and blah, blah, blah. So we're still seeing what is fairly important to Michael during this time. And it is important to many people. What they own and what they have as far as finances go is something that a lot of people base their self-identity off of. So when that's challenged or threatened, they fall apart fairly quickly. That might be some of the case of what we're seeing with Michael Barnett in this area. But it is fascinating how his approach to this really does focus on his possessions rather than his family or the relationships around him. And then he does blame everything on Natalia in this interview. That's very fascinating to note because in a later interview, in another one, he does not blame everything on Natalia. And this is one of the areas that some people have been noticing some inconsistencies, is that Michael Barnett's story and even his method of thinking and blame shifting does not stay consistent throughout both interviews or the multiple that he has done throughout time. So these are things that need to be made note of, is that there is that inconsistency of narrative in and of itself, which is a huge red flag and is often an indicator of deceit on some level. Let's see how this plays.
Dealing with, and tensions were so incredibly high. It was a very rough time, especially for the children. Before Natalia, we had been married for about 15 years. It's easily the best moment in time that our marriage ever had. We were so happy and comfortable that we had gotten to the point that, you know what, we started talking about maybe there's room here for somebody else. We were going to adopt a little girl out of Haiti named Gilberta. And right before that April, the earthquake hit Haiti. And suddenly our hopes were dashed because Haiti shut down all adoptions out of the country. So we were ready to adopt, but we missed our window. And then we get this phone call out of nowhere from this adoption agency in Florida called.
I find that interesting. Okay, so one, I have to at least give credit to the Barnetts for wanting to go through the adoption process. Now, there has been a lot of discussion around whether or not the Barnetts were actually suited for the adoption process, and as this series continues, a lot of those details will be revealed and talked about as to why they probably weren't. However, at least it seems as though at this point they were at a point to want to bring somebody else into the family instead of them already being in a rough way. Now, that might not actually have been the case, but that's the narrative that he's presenting so far. So for the sake of just going along with his words, kudos on that front. What I find interesting that he does in regards to when he received the call, he does a pretty substantial defensive gesture here, showing the palms forward and then leaning back. And that is an indicator of defensiveness, as he's saying, out of nowhere. So to me, that is interesting that he does mention that. A little bit of defensiveness around that. I'm kind of curious as to why that might be. Perhaps there was some level of conflict around that or something along those lines. Regardless, that's what he's showing with his nonverbal communication there. So it's something to make note of, that there may have been something around the situation itself of the call. Perhaps there was more details. Not sure. However, it is spiking up in his nonverbal communication. Let's just continue watching.
Called Adoption by Shepherd Care. They say, hey, we know you. We've seen your home study. We know that you have a charity for special needs children, and you've been doing that for a decade. We think you'd be perfect for this little girl that's going to be coming to us. She's a little person. She has dwarfism. Now, here's the problem. You got 24 hours to decide. And if you don't come get her on Monday, she's going directly to foster care.
Christina, I almost took it as a sign from above. Now we're jumping on a plane flying to Florida. It's exciting.
We pull up in the town, and I'll be honest, I was a little taken aback by the adoption agency location. It was in a rundown strip mall, maybe on the wrong side of tracks.
Little house that's been converted into offices.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here. So I am not very familiar with the adoption process. I have not gone through it myself. I have known some family, friends, and whatnot who have, but my experience in that area is not very vast. So as far as him speaking on the condition of the place and the location and so on and so forth, that doesn't really have too much weight behind it for myself personally. However, I am finding it fascinating that here he's mentioning that perhaps this adoption agency is on the quote-unquote wrong side of the tracks, or the shadier part of town. And as you're seeing this footage of where this adoption agency is, it does indeed look small, but it doesn't necessarily look like it's in a run-down area of town. Why I find that to be a very fascinating detail is that in another portion, either of this interview or another interview, I'm not quite sure, he mentions that the apartments that he drops Natalia off at are fantastic. They're the best that they could be because they have XYZ amenities around them. And when you see the footage, if you go and watch the documentary yourself, or if it happens to be here on the channel, you can see quite clearly that the apartments that he dropped Natalia off at are indeed on what would be considered the wrong side of the tracks in a shadier area of town, but he sees it as something that is the best case scenario for Natalia. And so I do find that fascinating that when it comes to him, him and his wife and his family, he has a certain standard as to what he's expecting. But when it came to Natalia, he had a very different standard as to what he would consider to be a perfect place. So that's just a fascinating contrast to draw. It's not really a positive in regards to Michael and his innocence, but we're going to go ahead and keep watching.
This didn't look like an adoption agency at all. First thing I'm saying to my wife is, check the address. This just doesn't look right. We're going to get a child here? So we start coming in, and they sit us into a little room, no bigger than the size of this room we're in right now, and they tell us, just wait here. Natalia's coming soon. And you've got to understand, with it being a closed adoption, the adoption agency was not willing to share any details of her before we came down. They gave us 2 pictures of her. They gave us a Ukrainian language birth certificate. Birth certificate supported 6, September 4th, 2003. We were all excited about that. My youngest son was 6. He was also born the summer of 2003. We thought this was going to be a situation where they're going to grow and develop and be twins.
We're in there for about an hour.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here. Another thing that I want to make note about the tone that Michael has throughout this is if he's talking down perhaps to the people that he's talking to, that maybe people won't have the intellect to keep up with what he's talking about. So he adopts this interesting tone that, for me, there wasn't too much around it other than it rubbed me the wrong way. Didn't really appreciate it. So that is something that I want to make note of. Perhaps he does have that level of moral or intellectual superiority. He has a level of emotional contempt towards people as it comes out in his tone. It has not shown up non-verbally across his face yet, but it is something that I've been able to make note of. Let's keep watching.
There for about an hour by ourselves.
We sign paperwork pretty quick. Sign here, sign here, sign here.
We hear the front door open. That's got to be her.
We start peeking through the keyhole. There's a little itty bitty keyhole. It's a solid door, and we're looking and we're looking. About 20, 30 minutes go by, and we can see the door open, and we can see the other family leave.
Because she was adopted before. This is her family that adopted her the first time.
Natalia's left behind. They had flown in, dropped her off, flew out.
We never spoke to them, and we are just thinking, how dare these other people give up on her?
And we've been worried for the last couple of days, worried sick, that our new daughter's not going to like us. And the next thing you know, the door opens. Natalia's right there. She comes running in. She got this big smile on her face. She's happy as can be. And she's shouting, "Mommy, Daddy, Mommy, Daddy, Mommy, Daddy." We're overcome with joy and emotion. Oh my gosh, that day in and of itself, without context, is one of the 5 greatest days of my life.
Again, I'm having difficulty really believing what Michael's saying throughout this. One, it sounds extremely rehearsed. All the way throughout, he doesn't seem to be making this up or having any authentic conception of this as he's talking. So that in and of itself feels a little bit disingenuous to me. Along with that, I'm still seeing these consistent no shakes throughout all of that. And then even down while he's talking about, well, this is one of the greatest days of his life or events of his life, he does a no shake and he leans back and there's defensiveness again in his nonverbal communication. To me, it's starting to feel fishy, but we're going to continue looking through this as we gather more information.
So we get to the hotel that night, and Christine's going to give our brand new daughter a bath. And I hear a shout from the bathroom. This was a "I'm not playing around, come here right now, Michael" shout. I get up, I go fly into the bathroom, and the color's almost gone from her face. It's almost like she's seeing a ghost. She's truly frightened, and she just doesn't know what she's seeing and what's going on. She says, Michael, look.
Now, this I find interesting. So he's saying that Christine shouted urgently enough to where he could pick up that it was severe, something was wrong, shouted from the bathroom, and that caused Michael to run in. And now Christine's being like super subtle with things. Now, for me, in my mindset, I find it fascinating that that initial urgent shouting was done directly in front of Natalia. And then as soon as Michael comes in, he's trying to say that they were very subtle and trying to indicate these things and to perhaps preserve Natalia. It doesn't line up. The logic behind that does not line up with how their actions are being portrayed, at least from what he's stating in this specific narrative. So that is another area that I find suspicious. I want to make note of that. Behaviorally, it doesn't seem to line up at all, but we're going to go ahead and keep watching.
Look down. And Natalia had full pubic hair. And I don't know what to think. Is that possible? Is that even possible? Can a 6-year-old...
Pausing there, the extreme desynchronization, I don't know what to think. He looks off to the side, and then he does a gesture, and then he puts it back down, and he's very much trying to act this area up, which fits with what his general narration style seems to be. Again, it feels very disingenuous to me, not only because of the desynchronization points, but also because of the tone that he's using and everything that goes into what he's presenting here. I am really not feeling authenticity from Michael, at least from this portion of the interview. And I feel like that's something to make note of. So we're going to keep watching here as this unfolds.
6-year-old have full pubic hair? I don't know. Google's telling us, well, earliest possible time, lowest common denominator, 8. So we just go, okay, look, our mission, we were going to show love and compassion to somebody that never had it before. That doesn't make a difference.
Once we got back to Indiana, at first there was an acceptance of the situation with Natalia.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause there. It did look as if Google said that it's between 8 and 13 would be the earliest average time for a person to be able to start developing pubic hair. I don't believe, and I did not dig down this rabbit hole personally, so if you would like to be able to do this and dig down this rabbit hole and let me know in the comments, I don't believe that that is the earliest ever that a person can start developing pubic hair. So that argument from Google, the Google search, perhaps was not quite valid enough to be able to make a judgment call on. So I do appreciate that at least it seems as though they just backburnered that, at least from what Michael's presenting, and then went about their lives as per normal. But even the fact that that was how he approached it, it felt a little interesting to me that amount of weight was given to an average based on a Google search. Just fascinating. Let's keep watching.
With Natalia and the pubic hair. All that mattered was there's a little girl that needs love and needs a home.
But eventually we had a lot of escalation going on in the first few months that we had her. There was a day I came home from work. Christine's got a pair of Natalia's underwear. Christine asked Natalia to tell me what's going on.
Natalia, tell Dad it happened. Okay.
And I can remember her.
So something that I want to make note of here is that Michael is going off of exclusively something that Christine has told Natalia to say. This wasn't something that he witnessed. This isn't something that we have any exterior witnesses on. It's all hinging around Natalia and Christine's word for something. And as we're seeing, Christine asks Natalia to say something, and Natalia's not responding immediately. We're hearing this disgusted, okay, as if Christine is fed up with Natalia centered around this. It is important to make note that there are no other exterior witnesses centered around this event that's about to unfold here. Everything's just hinging on the word of a single person, and then that singular person influencing a child to say something. That's just important to make note of, and let's watch it.
I can remember her physicalness at the time. Her hands were just out in front of her like this. And she said, well, I have a period, and I've been hiding it. And I just don't know what's going on right now.
After it first...
Okay, so that's that instance there. And again, Christine has, even here on tape, pushed Natalia to say a certain thing, and that's the whole hinging point of this entire case, is this involvement of Christine and Michael. Michael presents himself to be a victim, very much a victim in all areas and all levels in regards to this entire case, and blaming everything either on Natalia or later on Christine. And so that's suspicious to me as well. Anytime that a person tries to present themselves as fully innocent in an area, there's always something that they're omitting. And so just making note of that here, that we're still seeing these levels of possible manipulation from Michael on this area as he's trying to shift some of these responsibilities around to other people around him. Let's watch.
Got Natalia, and we started taking her to doctors within 2 months of getting her. Natalia needed foot surgery because of her condition.
Natalia has a very rare form of dwarfism, spondyloepiphyseal dysplasia. There's only about 3,400 people like that on this planet, we were explained by doctors. It just so happened, miraculously, that a doctor knew another 6-year-old girl with a spondyloepiphyseal dysplasia living in Indiana. We were stunned. We're going to have her...
I just feel this feeling of disconnect, of disingenuous presentation from Michael on this. Everything seems to be so overly rehearsed. Everything seems to be basically memorized. And for that does add this level of difficulty in a nonverbal read, because it does not sound like this was just a drop of the hat. Let's just plug in a microphone and hit record on the camera and talk for a bit. This sounds rehearsed. And that opens up plenty of avenues for rehearsing lies or rehearsing partial truths to be able to present them as full truth. And I'm not feeling good about his presentation so far. We know the reasons why. Let's keep watching.
Meet and interact with somebody just like her. How great is that? The other girl comes in. And for lack of a better term, Natalia is gigantic compared to this other girl.
There is a size difference, to be sure. I would not say that Natalia is gigantic compared to this other girl, but then also, okay. Fair, and people can be different sizes. And so this, again, does not feel like it's adequate evidence for the age difference between the two, if there is an age difference at all. Let's continue hearing what Michael has to say here.
Their cranial structures are different. Natalia, she's got the full forehead of an adult. She's got defined cheekbones as an adult. The other girl, her head is not developed at all. There's no way anybody could look at this picture and say those two are the same age. So when Natalia sees this person that should be close to the mirror image of her and realizes we see it, suddenly she fills her cheeks with air, blows them out a little bit so the definition in her cheekbones disappears. So that starts to happen. We literally see her head change. It's almost like you got me.
Okay, gonna go ahead and stop this part of the interview here. Something that I do want to make note of is that just the physical appearance of a child does not necessarily indicate its age. For instance, if you look through history, especially in times of troubling times, or even in present time now, if you look at children who have been through some things, their age seems their appearance seems beyond their age. They do seem to be older than what their actual age is, and this can be through life experience, this can be through trauma, this can be through environmental influences, and assuming that the story of Natalia is what it is from what we understand, she has been through some hard things, so it could indeed be reflected on her physical appearance. How she presents herself, how she holds herself can be reflected by that. And that does not mean that she's lying about her age. It could simply mean that she is presenting what she has experienced in her life thus far. So even this little portion here where he's saying, oh, well, she changed the way that she looked, it looks like two different pictures to me, and that's it. Like, it does not look like she's trying to manipulate in any different way. And yes, she's puffing out her cheeks a little bit in the second picture, but okay, that's not something that means that she's trying to change the entire shape of her head or face. It's perhaps just something that a child is doing. So we have to keep all of these things in mind and in context as we're moving forward. And as we do that, there only seem to be more and more questions pointed towards the Barnetts rather than Natalia. But there's a lot more to this case. So if you would like me to be able to continue looking at it, let me know in the comments of this video below if there are other interviews or other segments or anything that you would like me to take a look at specifically. You can also do that in the comments section below this video. You can hit the like button, hit subscribe, all that to see more of these. I do other true crime videos. I do some various YouTuber drama videos, celebrity. There's a number of things. Just go check out the other videos if you would like to. But in regards to this case, I feel like we're getting a little bit of an idea as to how Michael functions, what he feels, and what he's willing to present. And there's still this constant disingenuous tone throughout everything that he's been saying, as if it's been very rehearsed, perhaps even in front of a mirror, before he sat down and gave this interview. So, having some issues here as we're moving forward, definitely have some thoughts that are developing and some opinions that are developing throughout this, but there's a lot to unpack, and obviously this case is still ongoing, so don't go and try to interfere with any level of it. If you're watching this, try to let the professionals do as they want to. I am not involved personally on this case, so everything that I am saying throughout this video that I have said is something that is done through the lens of entertainment, but then also a level of education as we're able to kind of break down some of the nonverbal tells that we can see to feel the emotional weight behind them. So that is all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.